Amalina came to me with a body weight of 172 kilograms, type 2 diabetes, and the blood sugar between 10 and 11, which she dropped within the first 6 months of working with me to an 8.7 without counting a single calorie. So today I'm sharing the 5 most important lessons from working with her. So this is going to be a super insightful episode. Let's start with the first one, which is that the scale is a lagging indicator. So only looking at the scale, which is not the leading indicator in that case, we couldn't have made the progress that she made when it comes to the blood sugar management and so on and so forth. So the leading indicators in her case were the blood sugar management, the fact she had type 2 diabetes, her activity throughout the day, so that we could then really work on her metabolic health and choose an approach that suits the type 2 diabetes and what she needs throughout the day. For example, to give you the opposite example, if I just looked at the number and I know, okay, I'm assuming this lady is probably eating way too much and moving way too little, which I'm not saying she wasn't, but if I only focused on that, then I would let her do a calorie deficit, for example, which could put her body under more stress and therefore worsen the insulin resistance, make this a more difficult situation to be in and to solve. So really focusing on where she's at and what she's done before was so crucial instead of just the number. So she ended up losing a couple kilograms obviously as well in these 6 months next to just improving the blood sugar management, but doing things that actually suit her where she's at, making sure we stabilize blood sugar throughout the day, she gets the nutrients that she needs, she works on her activity. That were the things that then also move the blood sugar, right? Because if your blood sugar stays super high and you're just forcing the weight loss, then this can go in the opposite way quickly. Still, of course, losing weight is crucial to where she's at. It's not to say that the weight or the number on the scale is not important. Quite the opposite. It's super important, but it was not the leading indicator of how do we approach this situation. Okay, so that was the first one, which I found really interesting. Just to repeat and just to summarize real quick for her journey, and really has a lot to do with the second one, which is that we wanted to fix the system more than we wanted to fix the goal. And that's what we worked on dominantly, as compared to just focusing on the number, as I said before, and just cutting the calories. We made sure that what she ate was blood sugar friendly, helped her stabilize sugar throughout the day. And then also with the whole snacking and hunger throughout the day and her being sleepy super early. If we have this kind of pattern where we know energy is super off, sleep-wake cycle is super off, and then now start letting her cut her calories and she's eating less, then she doesn't really have the structure to build from there and to build on top of that and to make sure that she establishes a healthy routine, healthy energy. And in the testimonial video that she made for me, she also mentioned that the biggest win wasn't even the weight, from her experience, it was that for the first time in her whole life, she had a healthy sleep pattern where she didn't fall asleep right after work, then she was awake again, and then she went back to bed again in the middle of the night, at 12, 1 a.m., 2 a.m., but she actually had the energy in the afternoon after work, and then she had a proper sleeping time, which is the first time this happened in her life. Imagine, that's the first thing she mentioned, not even that she lost weight or improved blood sugar, because that's what she experienced as the biggest relief. And if we just focus on the number, and I see a person being obese, being overweight, and I just let her count calories, a lot of times it doesn't address the root of what's going on. Of course, it's going to be part of the equation, but if we don't look at what she's eating, the timing and the energy and what's behind that, so she can improve the blood sugar, improve her metabolic health, reduce the insulin resistance, and therefore lose weight, this is the wrong order if you ask me. So the deficit, just like I'm saying, I feel every single day, the deficit is one tool, but it shouldn't be the primary focus. So again, we wanted to address the system more than to address the end goal specifically. So that's the right things. And of course, part of that is also giving her the nutrients that she needs, that are especially crucial with diabetes. So these were the second biggest learning, or something that I just wanted to repeat, right? The system more often than not is more important than the goal itself. Number 3, which was especially important this year in March during Ramadan, she was fasting, right, from religious reason. A lot of clients, right, that are fasting and during Ramadan, or generally, they feel okay, I need to stop and then start over, right? I need to stop for Ramadan, and then in April, I will start over. It's an issue, right? An issue that you have to work around, or that you have to fix, or it's a bug in the system. But that's not how you should approach such a period, especially if this is happening every year, obviously, right? If she's fasting for a full month, and this is like 1/12 of the year, so literally 8% of the year she's fasting, then obviously just to like ignore it and start over again afterwards isn't the way to go. So what needs to be done in such a situation, which worked for her very well, was to implement an eating structure, because like when you're fasting, you can eat at 4 a.m. roundabout, and then when the sun goes down, depending on where you're based in the world, at like 6-ish p.m. So you have like a fasting window of 12, 14-ish hours. And what we did is we established a structure where she could feel as full as possible throughout the day from this morning meal, stabilize blood sugar throughout the day as much as possible. Of course, she's going to be hungry around the afternoon and before dinner, because it's such a long fasting time, obviously. But still, the idea was to work around that, and especially with the constraints that she had with the blood sugar management due to the type 2 diabetes. This is so important, and it doesn't only apply to women with type 2 diabetes, but type 1 diabetes as well. We need to eat in a way, even though we can inject the insulin and quote unquote can eat what we want as type 1s, we can't just go ahead and eat whatever we want, because still what we're eating is going to have a big impact on how easy it is to manage blood sugar, and how much blood sugar roller coaster or fluctuations we will have in the end. So that's why having like a proper eating structure, what to eat, and working around or working with the constraints that we have, in that case the long fasting period. In other cases it's maybe being super busy, having like a long meeting marathon every Monday, for example, with the team. So it really depends on the situation, but working around these constraints to adjust it was super important, which for her, like in Ramadan specifically, eating in a way where she feels full throughout the day as much as possible, stabilizes blood sugar throughout the day as much as possible, so she still has the energy to be a bit active at least, even though the energy sometimes isn't enough for working out if you're not eating the whole day. And second of all, the evening meal, making sure that this doesn't escalate, because that's like a very common typical pattern with the Ramadan. If you're like fasting the whole day and then it's just escalating at night with the whole desserts, sweets, social events, eating with the family. So that's really something to look out for. And then also at night, implementing simple rules of thumbs on what to do, because then, right, some family members bring some meals and you can't always like count how many calories, proteins, carbohydrates has that, but giving her simple rules of thumbs and working around that situation. Essentially, the social eating was an absolute crucial part of the journey. And if we went ahead with like how many people are doing it, if there's like an especially busy season, just like Ramadan, like is more like social eating, fasting, being with the family a lot. If you just like skip that period and then afterwards you want to continue, in such a period you can do a lot of damage, right? If you're like just eating random things, energy tanks, you need to like completely like get back to your old sleeping routine after Ramadan if you're just doing whatever. So that's really like something where you can just do as much as possible, at least in such a period and such a season. For her it was Ramadan, but can just like that be applied to like other busy seasons, like moving places, moving from one city to the next, and so on and so forth. Something else that's really like interesting here, from on one side I would say a coach's perspective, and that's lesson number 4, working with her. But even like for her perspective, or for everyone listening, a lot of times what I'm doing as a coach is I'm pushing back, right? So if someone comes to me and tells me I want to reach XYZ goal, she came to me saying she wanted to drop 30 kilograms. So essentially someone comes to me, I was at more than 120, 30, 40, 50 kilograms my whole life, and now I want to lose 30 kilograms in 6 months. Like, that's when I'm pushing back, right? But I hear these things a lot, right? I want to like achieve a lot in a short time. No, right? What I want you to do, if you've been struggling with that for like decades on end, is I want you to have a low attachment to your goal, right? The higher someone's intent to change is, when someone comes to me, the lower, the easier I want them to take it. Because that's usually like the more impatient you approach such a journey, the more like hectic you are about it, the longer you've dealt with the whole journey, the easier you need to take it, and the less attached you need to be to the outcome. Because chances are you want like the immediate result, but you're not able, or you're not willing, or not disciplined, motivated enough to stick with these changes yet. So you should do something that with a high intent, right? You want to change something, but you shouldn't be attached to the outcome right away. So making sure that you go in it and you forget about the goal. I like to set goals with clients as well, of course, because it increases the likelihood of them achieving it. But still, if you've dealt with that for such a long time, and then suddenly you want to turn around something in a few months, like for forever, right? I'll push back on that because, right, first of all, you should be detached from the outcome, but you should be able to put in the work without expecting this immediate outcome, because this is the skill that you're lacking based off you having struggled with that for your whole life, right? The skill that you're lacking is just doing something without expecting the return right away. So that's an absolute important skill, and also just reminds me of the saying, right? You get things the moment you stop wanting them so much. And that's because you put in the work without expecting the immediate outcome and being so attached to it. So this one is also important for her specifically. It was that I pushed back, or for me, in my perspective, like pushing back was super important for a client like her. But also, right, for you, if you're listening, you have these high goals, but you've been struggling with that for years and decades. If you're not able to put in the effort without expecting an immediate result, it's a bit questionable. Just like in your job, right? You're doing the seminars, you're doing further education, you're studying, you're gathering experience in your job for years and years on end, and you're doing that 40 hours a week, and then you slowly build up skills to then, right, progress in whatever you want to do with the career ladder, the business, whatever. And then it's kind of seems obvious, but it's similar with the food, right? You need to build habits, you need to stick with them. You shouldn't be questioning whether you're on the right path if you haven't, just because you've not made progress for a week, right? So like having some, not skin in the game necessarily, but putting in the effort and having this not too much of an attachment to the immediate outcome is absolutely crucial, and that's where this lesson is coming from. Let's finish off with the last one, lesson number 5 for today, and this one is really about like the consistency and what this actually means, because that's a word that's being thrown around a lot there, as in like just be disciplined, just stick with everything. And I think everyone has a different idea of that. And from her perspective, right, I can define that for you and what's like important. From her perspective, being consistent on what helped her, as in reducing the blood sugars like down to 8.7, which is still not the goal, of course, but which is a significant difference already. But making some change while she was stuck for her whole life before. Right, as I mentioned before, like with the sleeping pattern that we talked about, she never addressed it this way. She never slept that well before. So that's something that she'd been dealing with her whole life, and now she changed that. But how did she get there? Like, how has she made sure that she is consistent enough with that? And she also said, right, in the testimonial, that she was never that consistent in her whole life. And now she was, but she still had the flu, right? She was sick a couple times. She had the trips, like work trips, personal trips, because she's traveling to test out food and stuff. She had Ramadan coming up. She also had pain issues, right? Sciatica coming up. So a lot of stuff, a lot of roadblocks. So what consistent meant for her, and she's still not where she want to be in the end of the day, right? I mentioned blood sugar is at 8.7. She's still like way over 100 kilograms, so there's still a lot to do. But for the first time in her life, it's actually going in the right direction. And what consistent meant is making tiny changes, choosing a different lunch place, choosing a different dish for lunch, switching up the breakfast and making that consistent. And then for dinner, the social events, that's something she really hasn't really done much work on yet, right? So it's really these tiny little things, like the right lunch place, the breakfast that is being switched up, like a bit more activity throughout the day, some workouts throughout the week here and there. So that's been the things, and it's like really not the huge change. It's not that she's now sitting at the dinner table with her family and refusing to eat all of the foods that are being prepared. There still needs to be work that needs to be done, but consistency for her really did not mean like being super strict, and she really didn't have to like turn around her whole life, which, right, after her struggling with that her whole life, would have been too much of an aggressive move. It's really like one step at a time, and once she's used to something, then comes the next step. And that's what allows for consistency, and what consistent in that case really meant. It of course needs to be adapted to the goals. I'm not saying that no one should be like super strict and consistent. If you have high goals, you have a good relationship with food, you've been into the whole fitness, health field for a while, you've been invested, you've been interested, then you can be a bit more strict, right? If you have high goals to reach. But it is context dependent, and for her it was being consistent with super simple things, because in the beginning these already move the needle a lot. So that's what needed to be done, and that's the way she stayed consistent, right? So she just renewed working with me for another year, so that the weight can keep coming off. And stay tuned, right, for the next couple of months on her further progress. And yeah, that's the 5 lessons I've learned from working with Amalina, or that, right, came up in there. I find the most crucial ones also to share with everyone out there. And the reason I'm sharing all of that is really not to celebrate that as like the huge before and after, but really like to again show what is needed, what can be done to make this kind of progress, and like how you can think of the whole journey, right? When it comes to being detached from the outcome, what does consistency mean, and also, right, what do we want to focus on? It's not just the scale, as I said before, but it's really about the system behind that allows for stable blood sugar, allows for good energy, so that you can then also be active, lose the weight, and so on and so forth, right? So that's how you can think of such a journey. That was the 5 lessons. So if you found any of this interesting, then it would mean the world to me. And also if you want to not miss out on any future episodes, then go scroll up, subscribe to the episode, subscribe to the podcast, and I'm looking forward to the next one.